Thought the worst thing in a marriage was betrayal. I was wrong. The real hell began after I received the video and discovered who she truly was. What followed? Cold, calculated revenge that tore her life apart. Legally. Quietly. Completely. Want to know how it all ended? Stay with me till the end. The evening had barely settled over the city of Portland when my phone shattered the silence of the house. It was 7:45 p.m. on a Friday, and I had been sitting on the couch, tablet in hand, reviewing structural revisions for the Harborview Towers project. A name appeared on the screen, Sienna Cole, and with it came a tightening in my chest I could no longer ignore. The voice on the other end carried an edge of excitement, as she mentioned some last-minute work function she had to attend. A party, she said, hosted by Logan Pierce, a client celebrating the soft launch of his new luxury lounge. There was a time I might have brushed it off, chalked it up to her career in event planning. But not tonight. Tonight something felt wrong. We had made plans, simple ones, dinner at home, just the two of us. It wasn't grand, but after nearly a decade together, it was supposed to mean something. Yet again, work came first. Or at least, that's what she claimed. Her voice was cheerful, dismissive even, as she said not to wait up. And then she was gone. Just like that. No goodbyes. Just silence. I sat frozen, phone in hand, the emptiness around me growing louder by the second. 10 years of marriage, now reduced to brief phone calls, cancelled dinners, and cold distance. Our home, once vibrant with shared laughter and late-night conversations, now felt like a hollow echo of what it used to be. I glanced at the photograph on the shelf, our honeymoon in Lake Como, the sun kissing her cheeks as we laughed into the breeze. How far we had drifted from that version of us. Determined not to spiral, I forced myself back into my work. There were investor meetings ahead, and I couldn't afford distractions. But even as I buried myself in blueprints and budget breakdowns, her absence clung to me like a shadow. The hours bled into each other, and the house sank into stillness. Midnight came and went, and still, nothing from her. I eventually gave up on the pretense of productivity. Sleep was elusive, my thoughts too loud. Images my mind conjured against my will, a dimly lit room, laughter that wasn't mine, hands that didn't belong to me. I told myself I was overthinking, that Sienna was loyal. But the doubt had already taken root. Then, sometime past 2 a.m., my phone buzzed again. I grabbed it instinctively, hoping for a message, an apology, a reason. Instead, what greeted me turned my blood to ice. The message was short, vile in its simplicity. Attached to it was a video, grainy, shaky, but damning. The woman I had built a life with was there, unmistakable in the frame, tangled in the arms of a man I could only assume was Logan Pierce. Her voice, once reserved for whispered secrets and private laughter, now carried drunken amusement as she joked at my expense. I couldn't breathe. The phone slipped from my hands and hit the floor, but I barely noticed. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out the room around me. Everything we built, gone. Shattered in the span of 30 seconds of video filmed by someone with no respect for decency. Anger rose like a tide, nearly overtaking me. I wanted to confront her, to scream, to demand answers. But something colder and far more dangerous began to take its place. Revenge. Not of the chaotic, impulsive kind, but one carved from control, calculation, and precision. I retrieved the phone and saved the video to the cloud. Evidence, I told myself. I need it. Then, with hands still trembling, I opened my contacts and drafted an email to Victor Hale, a no-nonsense divorce attorney I'd worked with on a commercial dispute years ago. I didn't explain much, just enough to make the situation clear. Infidelity. Urgent consultation. By the time the email was sent, the first light of morning had begun to crawl across the floorboards. I heard her car pull up, heard the familiar sound of keys fumbling at the door. I was already waiting. When she walked in, the signs were all there, smeared makeup, tousled hair, and a scent that wasn't perfume, not hers anyway. She looked surprised to see me. She spoke, her voice casual, like nothing had happened. I didn't respond. I held up the phone, the damning image frozen on the screen between us. Her expression crumbled in real time. Words followed, tears, excuses, declarations of regret. But I was done listening. I turned, locked the door behind her, and stood on the other side as her sobs filled the air. It was over. Not just the night, but everything. And this time, I wouldn't be the one left in ruins. Morning settled over the city, pale and indifferent, as I moved through my routine like a man trapped underwater. The silence in the house now felt different, no longer haunting, but oddly empowering. Everything that had held me hostage the night before, shock, grief, disbelief, had burned away, leaving behind only precision. I wasn't going to fall apart. I was going to respond. I canceled all my appointments for the day, citing an illness. It wasn't a lie, not really. Some poisons don't show up on thermometers. I couldn't face the office. Not yet. Instead, I drove across town to a quiet cafe tucked between antique shops and forgotten bookstores, far from places Sienna and I used to frequent. I needed space, anonymity, control. Coffee in hand, I made calls. First to a locksmith. Our home was no longer a shared space. Then to the bank, freezing our joint accounts before she had a chance to exploit them. Finally, I contacted Natalie Cross, a private investigator I'd previously hired to look into internal theft at one of my construction sites. She was sharp, discreet, and ruthless when needed. She answered on the third ring, her voice as composed as ever. I told her the situation, skipping the emotion. I didn't need comfort, I needed clarity. Her tone shifted only slightly when I mentioned Sienna's name. "I'll begin immediately," she said. "You'll have an initial report within 48 hours. I hung up and leaned back, letting the bitter taste of the coffee ground me. There was no comfort in the ritual, only purpose. That was enough for now. By afternoon, Victor Hale responded to my message. He could meet that same day. I didn't hesitate. The meeting was brisk, clinical. I laid everything out, what had happened, the video, my intent to divorce. Victor listened without interruption, taking notes with measured precision. When I finished, he nodded. "You've done well so far," he said. "Gathering evidence, locking down assets, smart moves. Now let's talk strategy." For the next hour, he laid out my legal position under Oregon law. The betrayal alone gave us an edge. Add to that the impact on my mental state, the damage to my work focus, and we had the foundation for a strong case. He believed we could not only protect my financial standing but potentially pursue alimony. That word surprised me. "Alimony?" I asked, unsure. Victor adjusted his glasses. "Yes. Infidelity can be costly, not just emotionally, but professionally. Her decisions may have already caused damage to your reputation and productivity. We can argue for restitution." I left his office feeling steadier than I had in days. There was a plan now. A roadmap. As I returned home, a message from Natalie came through. "Need to speak. I found something." My pulse quickened. I called immediately. Her tone was low, serious. "It wasn't a one-time lapse," she said. "I've found evidence of at least 3 other meetings between Sienna and Logan. Always at his condo, always when you were working late. I also have surveillance that suggests he's not exclusive. He's seen with multiple women, 2 others this week alone." A hollow laugh escaped me before I could stop it. So not only had she betrayed me, but she had done so with a man who was playing her too. The irony was suffocating. "I'll compile the documentation," Natalie continued. "Photos, timestamps, background checks. Expect a full report by morning." I thanked her, though I wasn't sure for what. For confirming the worst? For removing even the smallest thread of doubt? That evening, I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I worked. I drafted emails, methodical, deliberate. The video and preliminary findings from Natalie were sent to Marcus Reed, Sienna's boss, and 2 of her largest clients. I gave them nothing but facts. No insults, no emotion. Just the truth, and let it scorch its own path. As the last email left my outbox, my phone rang. Her name on the screen again. I didn't answer. But I listened to the voicemail. Tears in her voice. Please. It was a mistake. I love you. Please talk to me. I deleted it without hesitation. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about reality. Boundaries. Consequences. Tomorrow, the paperwork would be filed. Tomorrow, the process of dismantling our shared life would begin. But tonight? Tonight, I allowed myself one final indulgence: silence. Not the haunted kind. The peaceful kind that follows the first decisive blow in a war you know you're going to win. The days that followed felt like pieces on a chessboard moving quietly into position. There were no dramatic confrontations, no shouted accusations or slammed doors, only the quiet ticking of a strategy unfolding. The morning after sending those emails, I received a reply from Victor Hale confirming that the divorce petition had been formally filed. Sienna would receive the notice within the next 48 hours. But I wasn't waiting for her response. I was already thinking 3 steps ahead. That same day, Natalie Cross sent me the full report. I didn't open it right away. Just the weight of the envelope in my hand was enough to make my stomach turn. When I finally did, I read in silence, page after page confirming what I already suspected. The affair had lasted for over 3 months. Every visit, every hotel receipt, every time-stamped photo, they all pointed to deliberate deception, not a drunken mistake. Worse yet, Logan Pierce wasn't the charismatic entrepreneur he pretended to be. Natalie's investigation revealed a man living beyond his means, funding his lifestyle through a business that was on the brink of collapse. His new club in downtown Seattle was deep in debt, and he had begun siphoning funds into personal accounts. There were rumors of unpaid contractors and falsified invoices. It was only a matter of time before everything fell apart. One detail stood out. Logan had also been intimately involved with Vanessa Clark, a major client of Sienna's. The woman was married, to a state senator, no less. The implications of this connection weren't lost on me. What began as personal betrayal now threatened to spiral into something larger, darker, and public. I called Natalie. Dig deeper, I said. If he's crossed any legal lines, I want proof. If Sienna knew about it, I want that too. She agreed without hesitation. Later that afternoon, I received another message, this one from Victor. Her lawyer wants to settle. Mediation. They're offering a 50-50 split. I didn't need time to consider. No, I said flatly. She forfeited fairness the moment she chose him over me. Victor didn't argue. Then we go aggressive, he replied. We'll push for the house, your business assets, and based on her misconduct, we'll demand alimony. That word again. Alimony? From her. The irony felt poetic. Over the next several days, I followed Victor's advice to the letter. I gave no interviews. I posted nothing. I avoided retaliation that could jeopardize the case. Instead, I focused on building mine, documenting the emotional toll, the sleepless nights, the disruptions to work. Every missed deadline, every canceled meeting, every note from my assistant was another piece of evidence. This wasn't revenge, it was accountability. Then came the final stroke. Natalie called late one evening. Her tone was sharp, focused. I've got it. Bank statements. Transferred funds. Logan's been embezzling money from the club, tens of thousands of dollars. And Vanessa? She's not just a fling. He's been using her company's name on fake vendor invoices. It was exactly what I needed. We didn't go to the authorities directly. We went to Detective Kane, a mutual contact Natalie trusted, someone experienced in financial crimes. Within 48 hours, a warrant was secured. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Logan was hosting the official grand opening of his club that weekend, and I'd received an invitation, almost mockingly, from him. The message was smug, dripping with false charm. He had no idea what was coming. I said yes. The night of the opening, I arrived early. I wasn't alone. Natalie was nearby, monitoring the entrance. Detective Kane waited outside with a pair of officers, timing everything to precision. Inside, the club was a haze of pulsing lights, synthetic perfume, and overpriced champagne. I spotted Logan in the VIP section, surrounded by people who mistook bravado for success. He spotted me and offered a grin, lazy and self-satisfied. He raised his glass in mock salute. Minutes later, the music stopped abruptly. The crowd turned toward the entrance as Detective Kane walked in, badge flashing. Logan's smile faltered, then collapsed entirely as the officers approached. The words came next, loud and final. "Logan Pierce, you are under arrest for embezzlement and fraud." The silence that followed was heavier than the music had ever been. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. As he was led out in handcuffs, our eyes met. There was no rage in mine, only clarity. His downfall wasn't vengeance. It was justice. A man who preyed on others, now facing the consequences of his own design. Outside, the night air was cool and clean. Natalie met me on the sidewalk. "It's done," she said. No. Not yet. But it was close. The official arrest of Logan Pierce sent shockwaves through every circle he'd clawed his way into. News spread fast. His club was shuttered before the weekend was over, investors vanished, and whispers of federal charges followed him like vultures. I watched it unfold from a distance, not celebrating, just observing. Destruction wasn't my goal, but truth always finds its way to the surface, and Logan had built his world on lies. Sienna reached out the following Monday. It was the first time I heard her voice since I'd locked her out of our home. She didn't mention the arrest. Didn't mention the video. Just asked, in a shaky voice, if we could talk. I agreed. We met at the house, the one I was now determined to keep. She arrived looking older, thinner, her face bare, her eyes dull. It struck me how quickly betrayal aged people, from both ends. She entered the living room slowly, as if expecting it to reject her. I didn't offer a seat. Instead, I handed her a folder. Inside, evidence. Every piece Natalie had gathered. Photographs. Messages. Receipts. And a copy of the divorce terms we were now moving forward with. She flipped through the pages in silence. The moment she saw Vanessa Clark's name, her lips parted slightly. She hadn't known then. Logan had fooled her too. There was a time that might have made me feel something, pity, perhaps. But not anymore. When she finally looked up, her face was pale. All of this, is real?" I nodded once. Every word. Every photo. Every lie. She stood frozen, guilt settling into her bones. "I didn't know what he was doing." "I swear. And yet you chose him," I said quietly. "You chose someone who used you, for your contacts, your clients, your access. And you threw away everything we had." Tears came next, uninvited and too late. I was unhappy. She whispered. I felt unseen. Logan made me feel alive again. But it wasn't real. I see that now. You saw it too late. She pleaded, said we could try counseling, repair what was broken. But love, once fractured like this, didn't bend back into shape. It snapped, sharp and final. What we had wasn't just broken, it had been betrayed, abandoned. I handed her the final piece of the puzzle, the official divorce papers drawn up by Victor. The settlement was clear. I would retain the house, most assets, and thanks to the damage to my professional life, she would pay modest alimony until she recovered her income. The look of disbelief on her face might have hurt, once. But now, it just confirmed that she hadn't expected real consequences. "This isn't fair," she muttered. "I lost everything already. My job. My clients. My reputation. And now you want me to pay you? Fair?" I echoed. "Was it fair when you laughed about me on video? Was it fair when you let him record you?" When you mocked everything we'd built? Her voice failed her. She sat, clutching the folder like it might burn through her palms. I didn't offer comfort. She signed the papers with trembling hands, tears dotting the edge of the signature line. As she stood to leave, she paused at the door, glancing back one last time. I'm sorry, Noah, she said, almost inaudibly. For everything. I said nothing. Some wounds didn't need words, they just needed space to heal. Once she was gone, I sank into the quiet. Not empty this time, but still. Heavy with finality. The kind that comes not from loss, but from clarity. There would be no reconciliation. No second chance. Only forward. In the following days, I met with Victor and closed the loop. The legal process moved quickly, especially with the strength of our case. Sienna's attorney tried to soften the terms, but the evidence spoke louder than any argument they could muster. Victor handled everything with cold precision, his tone unreadable as we signed the last of the documentation. It's done, he said, sliding the final file across the table. I nodded. No triumph. Just closure. That night, I poured myself a drink and stepped out onto the back patio. The air was cold, crisp, clean. I looked up at the sky, clear and vast, feeling, for the first time in months, something close to peace. Not because I had won, but because I had survived. And now, I was finally free. The weeks that followed moved quietly, like dust settling after a storm. The final divorce documents were processed, notarized, filed. I signed them with a steady hand and didn't look back. Victor Hale, ever composed, sent me a short message after. Congratulations, Noah. It's over. Welcome to the rest of your life. The word congratulations felt strange. There was no celebration in the end of something I once considered permanent. But perhaps there was something else, relief, maybe. Clarity. The kind of emotional stillness that comes when the chaos finally dies out. One evening, shortly after the paperwork was finalized, I returned home to an empty house that didn't feel quite as heavy as before. It still echoed in places where Sienna's presence had lingered, but now those echoes were fading. I made myself a drink, stood in the living room, and pulled down the wedding photo that had hung there far too long. I studied it one last time, not with grief, but with understanding. It was a chapter, nothing more. I placed it in a drawer and didn't feel the urge to open it again. Not long after, I received an unexpected message from Tessa Monroe, the woman I'd met briefly at Logan's club the night of his arrest. Her tone was light, casual, but curious. She suggested coffee. I said yes. We met at a quiet cafe not far from my office, and it surprised me how easy it felt. No wait. No expectations. Just conversation, simple and warm. She asked about work, about my projects, about how I was really doing, and somehow, I answered with honesty I hadn't shown anyone in a long time. That coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into long walks. And those walks became quiet nights on my porch with glasses of wine and unhurried silence. She never asked too much, never pushed for details I wasn't ready to give. And yet, with each meeting, I found myself giving more anyway. Somewhere in the background, Logan Pierce's story was unraveling publicly. He faced multiple charges, financial audits, and the scorn of every investor he'd conned. Headlines called it the collapse of a star. I didn't follow the updates closely. I didn't need to. Justice had taken its course, and the consequences no longer concerned me. As for Sienna, she faded into the periphery. I heard through a mutual acquaintance, Jenna, her sister, that she'd moved out of Seattle and taken a job at a smaller agency up north. Her career had taken a hit, but she was trying to rebuild. I felt nothing when I heard it. Not satisfaction, not sadness. Just neutrality. She had her road. I had mine. One evening my phone rang. It was her. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something in me, perhaps closure's final thread, answered. Her voice was different. Quieter. Not broken, just smaller. She thanked me, for everything. Not the pain, not the exposure, but for forcing her to see the truth. About Logan. About herself. She told me she was in therapy, trying to understand what led her to destroy something she once cherished. I didn't offer forgiveness, but I did offer sincerity. I told her I hoped she found peace. We ended the call on neutral ground. It was enough. One Saturday morning, I drove out to the Cascades. There was a trail I used to hike alone before life got complicated, before marriage, before betrayal, before bitterness. The climb was steep, the air sharp, the sky impossibly blue. When I reached the summit, I sat down on a flat rock and looked out across the valley. Trees moved gently in the breeze. Life went on, quiet and unbothered. My phone buzzed. A message from Tessa. Dinner tonight? I'll cook. Bring wine. Smiley face. I smiled and typed back, absolutely. I'll bring 2 bottles. That night, as we sat on her patio beneath a string of soft lights, listening to music and sharing stories about our pasts, not as confessions, but as bricks laid carefully for something new, I felt something shift. Not the fireworks of reckless love. Something better. Steady. Safe. Real. Later, as we stood in the kitchen cleaning up, she looked at me and asked, "So what do you want now, Noah?" I didn't hesitate. Exactly this. She smiled and leaned in, resting her forehead against mine. Then don't let go of it. I didn't plan to. Somewhere between grief and revenge, I found myself again. Not the man I used to be, but someone stronger, wiser, and finally free. The past had been loud, violent, consuming. But the future? The future was quiet and full of light.